If your dog's barking at a locked freezer in the middle of a snowstorm, you open the damn freezer. That was the thought running through Officer Mark Daniels's mind as he stood there, frost biting at the edges of his uniform, the wind howling like it had something to say. Canine Tyson had never barked like that before. Not during drug busts, not during search and rescue drills, not even when they pulled that drowning girl out of the lake last spring. This was different. Tyson's ears were pinned back. His hackles stood like bristles. His paws slammed the metal door over and over. Not aggressive, desperate. And that sound, that noise he let out, it wasn't a bark. It was a plea. Officer Daniels clicked off his flashlight, leaned close to the door of the old butcher's walk-in freezer behind Highway 17. It hadn't been used in months since Old Man Duffy had passed. Folks in town said it had been padlocked shut since the estate sale. But tonight, that lock was open. Barely. Like someone had snapped it shut and changed their mind. The wind had blown the door tight again, sealing whatever secrets lay inside. The call came in 20 minutes earlier. A passerby heard howling by the old slaughterhouse. Probably coyotes or a lost dog, dispatch figured. But Mark decided to check it out anyway. Thank God he did. Because Tyson knew something no one else did. 3 hours earlier, the night had been uneventful. A quiet shift. Coffee lukewarm. Radio chatter dead. Then the clouds rolled in, black and fat with snow. By the time Mark rolled up to Duffy's old lot, it was a whiteout. Nothing but headlights, breath fog, and the low, eerie drone of wind through wire fence. "I don't like this place," he muttered to Tyson, who sat alert in the back seat. Tyson tilted his head, eyes sharp. And the moment Mark cracked the door open, the German Shepherd launched from the cruiser, nose to the air, straight for the back of the building, like he knew. The snow crunched as Mark followed the dog. Heavy boots, gun holstered. No flashlight yet. He didn't want to disturb the quiet too soon. Then he saw them. Footprints, small, too small, barefoot, only one set, leading to the freezer door, none leading out. Mark's stomach turned. He pulled the light and swept it across the icy trail. The footprints disappeared beneath the lip of the freezer. He turned to call for backup. Tyson snarled at the door. It wasn't a snarl of warning. It was panic. "Easy, buddy," Mark whispered, moving to the handle. "Let's not spook anything." But Tyson's whimper told him whatever was behind that door had already been through hell. Mark gripped the rusted handle, pulled. It wouldn't budge. Frozen shut. He pulled harder. Nothing. Then he stopped. That sound. A thump from inside, like a tiny fist. Once. Then silence. He radioed to dispatch. "This is Unit 12. I need medics. I've got a possible child trapped in a freezer. Location, Duffy's old meat house. Tyson's indicating distress. I'm breaching." He didn't wait. Shoulder slammed the door. Once, twice. On the third hit, it cracked. A blast of cold air poured out like death itself. The flashlight beam cut through the fog. There, curled in the far corner, under a sheet of frost-covered insulation, was a boy. Maybe 6 or 7. Eyes wide open. Skin bluish. Lips barely moving. And in his tiny hands, a crumpled shirt. Blood-stained. Adult size. Mark didn't think. He dropped the light and ran to him, sweeping him up into his coat, yelling into his radio, "I need that ambulance now!" Tyson stayed close, whining and licking the boy's cheek. The child didn't flinch, but his lips formed one word. "Tyson, if this moment has you holding your breath, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for real stories of courage, survival, and the incredible bond between humans and their four-legged protectors. These animals don't just save lives, they change them." As the ambulance tore through the snowy back roads, Mark sat in the back beside the paramedics. Tyson crammed between their legs. The boy hadn't let go of Tyson's fur the entire ride. "His core temp's dangerously low," the EMT said. Another 30 minutes and he'd have gone stiff. No ID, Mark said. No shoes, no jacket, just that shirt in his hands. The EMT glanced down at it. Men's flannel, torn, and the name Ronnie stitched on the tag. At the hospital, Mark waited outside the ER doors, arms folded, uniform stiff from melted snow. He was still trying to wrap his mind around it. That kid had been left there, on purpose, and the way he clung to Tyson, like the dog was the only living thing he trusted, made Mark's jaw tighten. He'd seen that look before, in war photos, in the eyes of kids pulled from wreckage overseas. It said one thing: I wasn't supposed to make it. An hour later, a nurse stepped out. He's stable, conscious, but scared. He keeps asking for the dog. Mark nodded. Tyson had never been trained for therapy. But when he walked into that recovery room and placed his chin gently on the boy's bed, the boy smiled. The first and only smile they'd seen. Mark sat beside the bed. You want to tell me your name, kiddo? The boy hesitated, then whispered, Danny. Danny? Do you know where your mom is? He shook his head. Do you know who put you in that freezer? Danny's eyes welled up. He opened his mouth, then closed it. But then he said, almost too soft to hear, he said I wasn't his problem anymore. Mark froze. Who, Danny? Danny looked at Tyson, then back at Mark. My stepdad. Outside the room, Mark felt a knot form in his chest. He had dealt with deadbeat parents, runaways, even abuse cases. But something about this one, it felt different, colder, calculated. He looked down at Tyson, who hadn't stopped watching the boy's door. You knew, Mark whispered, didn't you? Tyson wagged his tail once, but that wasn't the end. Later that night, after the snow stopped, Mark got another call. Security footage from a gas station 10 miles out. Time-stamped just 3 hours before they found Danny. A tall man, flannel shirt, same stitching. Ronnie, buying gas, coffee, and a map. Behind him, a passenger seat. Empty, except for a child's backpack. Mark's hand clenched around the phone, because if that man left town, he didn't leave alone. And if Danny was in that freezer, then who was in the truck? The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, but all Mark Daniels could focus on was the boy sleeping in room 12, Danny. The kid had drifted off with one hand tangled in Tyson's fur, like he couldn't fall asleep unless he was touching something alive, something safe. And Tyson? The old dog hadn't moved an inch in 2 hours. He laid there like a sentry, eyes half closed, ears twitching at every distant footstep. Mark took a slow sip from the vending machine coffee in his hand and stared through the room's glass window. Danny had been left to die in a freezer. Someone made that decision. Deliberate, calculated, and Mark intended to find out who. Earlier that night, after Danny was stabilized, a nurse handed Mark a clear plastic evidence bag containing the only thing found on the boy, a crumpled flannel shirt with Ronnie stitched on the collar. He'd seen that name again an hour later, on grainy gas station security footage from a truck stop 20 miles west of town. There he was, a tall man in a red and black checkered shirt, unshaven, eyes cold, buying gas, coffee, a pack of cheap cigarettes. The timestamp read 10:12 p.m., a full 40 minutes after Danny was left in the freezer, meaning the man hadn't panicked. He'd planned, and judging by the frame showing a child's backpack tossed in the passenger seat, he hadn't been alone. Mark slammed the laptop closed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He called dispatch. I need an APB put out. White Dodge Ram, 2009 model, dented left tailgate, possible false plates. Male driver, mid-30s, Caucasian, name likely Ronnie. Suspect in child endangerment, possible kidnapping. Then he glanced at Tyson, who was now sitting quietly by the hospital room door, like a statue. You think he's got another kid in that truck? Tyson looked at him, didn't blink. Morning came slowly. Snow had melted to brown slush. Mark walked into the hospital cafeteria just as his phone buzzed. Sheriff Braddock. Mark, you might want to take a drive up Highway 9. Motel clerk at Pineview Inn says he recognized your suspect. Man came through late last night. Had a little girl with him. Paid cash. Real twitchy. They left before dawn. Mark stood, already heading toward the elevator. Which way'd they go? Clerk says west. Girl looked scared. She wasn't talking. Any plates? Nope. Said he had a tarp over the back of the truck like he was hauling lumber or something. Covered the plates. By the time Mark hit the road, Tyson was already curled in the passenger seat of the cruiser. The dog's eyes scanned every tree line, every parked car like he was reading clues only he could understand. The Pineview Inn wasn't much. A dusty roadside dump with wood paneling, peeling paint, and a flickering vacancy sign that probably hadn't worked right since the 80s. Mark spoke with the clerk, a young guy with patchy facial hair and a NASCAR cap. Nervous. Yeah, he came in, maybe midnight? Said he needed a room for him and his niece. Paid cash. Kept the girl close. Wouldn't let her talk to me. She looked about 7, blonde hair. Had a bruise on her cheek. Mark felt his stomach drop. You get a name? The clerk shook his head. He signed the logbook as Rick, but he said her name was... I think it was Maddie. Back in the cruiser, Mark sat in silence. The pieces were starting to come together. Danny, Maddie. One boy left in a freezer. One girl taken across county lines. Same man, probably the same house, same abuse. He looked at Tyson. You think they're siblings? Tyson whined softly. Then turned to the window again, tail flicking once. Mark took that as a yes. By late afternoon, they'd hit a string of gas stations trying to trace Ronnie's route westward. Finally, at a rest stop in Del Rio, a young cashier remembered him. Yeah, guy came in about 6 a.m., had a girl with him. Wouldn't let her go near the bathroom without standing outside the door. Bought jerky and 2 Red Bulls. She looked pale, cold, had no coat. Mark leaned across the counter. Did she say anything? Anything at all? The cashier hesitated. She looked at me and mouthed something. I didn't catch it till after they left. It looked like she said, "Help me," but I wasn't sure, man. I thought maybe I saw it wrong. Mark returned to the cruiser and sat there for a beat. Then he slammed the steering wheel. Damn it! Tyson gave a low, understanding grumble. Mark knew they were running out of time. Guys like Ronnie, they don't keep kids around for long once the heat starts building. And something was telling him that freezer wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was a message. One kid discarded, the other a hostage. But why? He called the department again. I need everything on Ronnie. Last name unknown. Cross-check with domestic reports, CPS logs, anything in the last 2 years involving children named Danny or Maddie. Use facial recognition from that gas station clip if you need to. While waiting, Mark stopped at a diner on the outskirts of Pecos. The kind of place where everyone knew each other, and gossip was currency. Tyson waited by the booth as Mark sipped his 3rd coffee of the day. That's when the waitress came over. Middle-aged, sharp eyes. That your police dog? Mark nodded. She looked at him real steady. You the one looking for the man with the kids? Mark blinked. You know him? She leaned in close. About 2 weeks back, I had a little boy and girl come in here with a guy in a flannel shirt. Said they were his, but they didn't talk like they were. They acted scared. Kids like that? They know better than to speak when someone's watching. Mark's heart pounded. Did he say his name? She nodded. Ronnie Dupree. By nightfall, the background check came in. Ronnie Dupree, 36, known drifter. 2 counts of child endangerment dropped due to lack of evidence. Girlfriend died last year in what was ruled an overdose. She had 2 kids, Danny, age 7, and Madeline, age 5. But that wasn't all. She had a restraining order filed just 2 months before her death against Ronnie Dupree. Mark read the final lines aloud. Says he threatened to erase what ain't his. Mark's hands clenched around the steering wheel again. Danny and Maddie weren't his biological children. They were hers, and Ronnie had tried to make that go away. That night, Mark sat in the parking lot outside the hospital again, staring through the window into room 12. Danny had woken up and was coloring quietly. Tyson lay beside him, tail wagging lazily, as if the hospital bed had become a battlefield foxhole he was guarding with his life. Mark took out a pad of paper. He wrote one name at the top, Ronnie Dupree, and underneath, left Danny to die, took Maddie. 2 days max before he vanishes again. One last lead, Dupree's old hunting cabin. Dispatch had found the address buried in an old parole form. Mark stood up, holstered his badge, and looked down at Tyson. "You ready, partner?" Tyson didn't need a leash. He just stood, stretched, and walked beside him like he already knew the way. Because he probably did. The road twisted like a snake through the pines, mud-slicked and narrow, and Mark Daniels could feel his tires slipping beneath him every time the cruiser hit a rut. The further west they drove, the fewer the houses, the older the mailboxes, and the more the shadows seemed to lean in like they were listening. Next to him, Tyson sat upright, his ears twitching at every broken branch or distant crow's call. The cabin was still another 20 minutes out, deep in the old reservation line where most GPS signals gave up trying. Mark had only one thing to go on, an address scrawled across the top of a parole form from 8 years ago. Ronnie Dupree's old hunting cabin. According to the file, it had no running water, no electricity, and hadn't been checked by probation officers since 2017. A perfect place to disappear. A perfect place to hide a child. As they reached the last bend, Mark killed the headlights. The forest swallowed the car like a grave. Only the sound of gravel crunching under tires broke the silence. A clearing opened up. There it was, a one-room wooden structure, leaning slightly to the right like time had gotten tired of holding it up. The roof sagged. The porch creaked in the wind. A single rust-colored truck sat under a tarp by the side, left tailgate dented. We found him, Mark thought. But this was where things could go bad fast. He reached across and scratched behind Tyson's ear. "Stay close, buddy. We don't know what's inside." Tyson gave a quiet snort in response, alert but calm. The cruiser door clicked open. Then they moved. One man, one dog, silent as breath through snow. The front porch was covered in leaves and old beer cans. A pair of muddy boots sat near the threshold. One turned sideways like they'd been kicked off in a hurry. Mark stepped lightly, careful not to let the boards groan too loudly. He listened. Nothing. Then soft. A whimper, barely audible. But Tyson heard it too. His body froze, nose tilted upward. His eyes fixed on the wall to the left. A boarded-up side window. Mark inched toward it and peered through a crack. Inside, an old wood stove, a pile of cigarette butts, a stained mattress, and a girl, blonde hair, sitting on the floor. She was hugging a stuffed animal with one arm and rubbing her eyes with the other. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Maddie," Tyson let out the faintest low growl. Not aggressive, protective. Mark stepped back. Time to act fast. Quietly. He checked the perimeter. No movement, no noise. Then he spotted it. A shadow near the tree line, pacing. A man, cigarette glowing in the dark. Rifle slung over his shoulder. Ronnie. And Mark realized the man wasn't inside because he thought no one would come looking. He was just waiting out the heat. Mark crouched low behind the truck and whispered into his radio. "Unit 12, I've located the suspect's vehicle and believe the girl is inside the structure. Requesting immediate backup. Proceed quiet." Static, then nothing. No signal. Figures. He looked to Tyson. "It's just us." Tyson didn't move. He was staring at the cabin door like he could already see the moment it would swing open. Mark moved first. He crept up the side of the cabin, boots landing soft on wet earth. He eased the door handle. Locked. He took one breath, then kicked. The door blew open and crashed against the wall. The girl screamed and scurried backward. But it wasn't fear in her eyes, it was hope. "Maddie?" Mark said, stepping in with hands raised. She stared at him, blinking, clutching the stuffed animal to her chest. "I'm Officer Daniels. I'm here to take you home." Tyson padded in behind him. The moment the girl saw the dog, she broke, collapsing into sobs. Tyson walked straight to her, sat, and gently nudged his nose into her tiny hands. She whispered, "Tyson," like my brother said. Mark knelt beside her. "Is your name Maddie?" She nodded through the tears. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her. "Can you walk?" She nodded again, still shaking. That's when the click came. Outside, a rifle being loaded. Mark threw Maddie behind the overturned table and dropped low. "Stay here, don't move unless I say." Tyson stood in front of her like a stone lion. Mark eased toward the door, weapon drawn. The voice came from outside. "You come to take what's mine again?" It was Ronnie. He sounded calm, too calm. Mark stayed behind the frame. "They were never yours. You know that." "You sound like her," Ronnie spat. "Always saying what's mine ain't. But I kept him alive, didn't I?" "You left a boy in a freezer." Pause, then a chuckle. "Yeah. Well, he always was the weak one, sir." Mark had enough. He signaled Tyson. The dog darted out the door like lightning. Mark followed. Ronnie turned too late. Tyson slammed into him mid-step, knocking the rifle from his hands. The man hit the ground with a grunt. Tyson's jaws clamped around his wrist. But not biting, just holding. Mark rushed in and cuffed him, as Ronnie cursed and twisted. "I'll kill that mutt! I swear!" Mark tightened the cuffs. That mutt just saved another life, again. An hour later, sheriff deputies rolled in. Ronnie was hauled off, screaming. Maddie rode in Mark's cruiser, Tyson in the back seat, his head resting beside her as if he'd known her forever. They stopped by the hospital. Danny was waiting. The moment the siblings saw each other, they ran across the hallway like they'd been apart for years, not days. Maddie cried. Danny held her like he was afraid she'd disappear again. Tyson sat beside them, quiet, watchful. Later that evening, the sheriff approached Mark with a cup of black coffee. "You did good today?" Mark nodded. "It wasn't me," he said, looking at Tyson, who was curled at the kid's feet. "It was him." The sheriff smirked. "That old dog's got one hell of a nose." Mark smiled faintly. "He's got more than that. He knows what people miss. He sees what we overlook." As the sun set over the hospital roof, casting a golden hue across the glass windows, Mark knew something had changed. Not just for Danny and Maddie, but for him. He bent down to Tyson and whispered, "You're not just a partner, are you?" Tyson didn't answer. Didn't need to. The hospital room was still. Morning light filtered through the blinds in soft streaks, casting golden bars across the tile floor. Danny and Maddie sat side by side on the hospital bed, Tyson curled at their feet like a furry shield. Mark Daniels leaned against the doorway, sipping lukewarm coffee. His uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in the cruiser, and his eyes burned from too little sleep and too much worry. But for now, for this moment, the kids were safe, and Ronnie Dupree was behind bars. Still, something itched in the back of Mark's mind. A thread left dangling. A gut feeling he couldn't shake. Because Ronnie wasn't smart enough to plan everything they'd seen, not alone, not in the way it had played out. Which meant there was more. Maddie sat up and tugged gently at Mark's sleeve. "Officer Daniels?" He set his cup down and knelt beside her. "What is it, sweetheart?" She pulled a small pink backpack from behind her pillow. It was faded and stained, the zipper half broken. She placed it gently in his lap. "This was in the truck," she said. "Ronnie said I wasn't supposed to open it." Mark hesitated. "You didn't?" She shook her head. "I was scared, but I think maybe now's okay." Mark gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I think it is." He carried the bag into the hallway, careful not to spill its contents in front of the kids. Inside, a few broken crayons, a granola bar, a bottle of ibuprofen, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue and sealed in a plastic bag, a folded piece of lined paper. Mark opened it. The handwriting was jagged, slanted, female. "To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. My name is Tara Ellis. Danny and Maddie are mine. They are good, kind. They don't deserve what's happened. But I didn't know how to stop it. Ronnie was never their father, just a man I met when I was too broken to see the danger. He got worse after we moved in with him. I tried to leave, but I was broke, scared. Then the bruises started. Then the threats. He said he'd take the kids if I ever ran. Said he'd return them to the ground. That's what he called it. Fixing God's mistake. I knew I had to get them out, but I was already dying. My liver's failing. No insurance, no family, just them. So I hid this letter in the bag, and I prayed someone better than me would find it in time. Mark stared at the last line. If nothing else, please tell them I love them. Every single day. He folded the letter slowly, heart heavy. She had tried. Tara Ellis had done everything a dying mother could do, and Ronnie had erased her like she was nothing. Back in the room, Maddie looked up with wide eyes as Mark re-entered. Was there something in it? Mark knelt down, took her tiny hand in his. There was. It was from your mom. Maddie blinked. Did she write to us? She did, Mark said, voice soft. She said she loves you, that she never stopped. Maddie buried her face in Tyson's fur and nodded, trying hard not to cry. Danny, older by only 2 years but already acting like a protector, wrapped an arm around her. Thank you, he whispered. Mark cleared his throat. You two hungry? Both nodded. I'll see what I can find. Maybe even pancakes if we're lucky. As Mark stepped into the hallway, Sheriff Braddock was waiting. Morning, he said, lifting a travel mug. You get any sleep? Mark asked. Not since I was 35. You? Mark cracked a dry smile. Braddock leaned closer. We just got confirmation from the state coroner. Tara Ellis died of liver failure, acute cirrhosis. She wasn't lying. Mark nodded. I found her letter, hidden in Maddie's backpack. He handed the note over. Braddock scanned it quietly. When he finished, he blew out a slow breath. Hell of a woman. Hell of a mother. She tried to escape, Mark said, but Ronnie beat her to it. Speaking of, Braddock continued, Dupree's sitting in county lockup. He's stonewalling us. Keeps muttering about how the ground takes what it wants. Mark clenched his jaw. We missed something. They drove to Ronnie's former property just before noon. The house had already been taped off for evidence, but Mark wasn't interested in the main structure. He followed Tyson around the perimeter, letting the dog guide them. That's when Tyson froze, near the back of the property, beside an overgrown garden bed. He pawed once at the ground, then twice. Then he started digging. Braddock moved fast, grabbing a spade from the patrol truck. Within minutes, the outline of a small wooden box appeared beneath the dirt. It wasn't a casket. It was a lockbox. Inside, a set of documents. A fake birth certificate naming Ronnie as the kid's legal father. A false death certificate for Tara Ellis. A burner phone. And dozens of torn-up photos, most of them taped back together. In every one, Tara looked thinner and thinner. But she never stopped smiling when she held her kids. This was the insurance, Braddock muttered. He was going to fake her death, claim the kids, maybe sell the girl. Mark didn't respond. He was too focused on a single photo, the last one in the stack. It showed Danny holding Tyson as a puppy, handwritten on the back. For Danny, because heroes don't always wear capes. Mom. Back at the hospital, Mark knelt beside Tyson and rested his hand on the dog's chest. You found what no one else would have looked for, he whispered. Tyson wagged his tail once and licked Mark's hand. That evening, Mark sat on the hospital patio as the sun went down, his boots kicked up on a chair, watching the kids draw chalk pictures on the concrete. One was of a house. Another showed a man, a woman, 2 children, and a dog. Braddock joined him. We found something else in Ronnie's parole records, the sheriff said. Before Tara, he was flagged in a trafficking case. No charges stuck, but he was on their radar. So this wasn't personal, Mark said. It was business. And when Tara wouldn't cooperate, he got rid of her. Tried to erase the kids. But Tyson made sure he couldn't. Braddock lifted his cup. To the mutt, Mark clinked his own cup against his. To the hero. Later, before lights out, Mark walked into room 12 one last time. Maddie was curled up with her head on Danny's shoulder. Tyson was already asleep by the foot of the bed. Mark leaned down beside Danny. "Hey, just wanted to say good night." Danny looked up. "Are we going to have to leave soon?" Mark hesitated. "No, not if I can help it." "You mean, like, stay with you?" Mark smiled. "That sound okay?" Danny nodded slowly. "Only if Tyson can stay, too." Mark laughed, his throat tightening. "That's the deal." The courthouse smelled like fresh paint and cold coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glare over the hardwood floors. It was one of those small-town courtrooms where everyone knew someone, whether they wanted to or not. Officer Mark Daniels sat quietly in the second row, his canine partner Tyson at his feet, resting calmly, like he knew he was about to make history. The prosecution table was stacked with manila folders, evidence bags, and photographs no one should ever have to look at more than once. On the other side of the room, shackled and sunken-eyed, sat Ronnie Dupree. His greasy hair hung limp around his face, and his lips twitched in something that was either a smirk or a tic. He hadn't spoken much since the arrest. Not to his lawyer, not to the press, not even to the detectives. But his silence didn't mean innocence. It meant strategy. Mark glanced toward the hallway, where Danny and Maddie waited with a court-appointed child advocate. The kids weren't required to testify. Judge Lott made sure of that. But they had wanted to be here, wanted to see justice unfold, even if they didn't fully understand how much weight that word carried. Maddie clutched Tyson's favorite toy in her arms, a knotted-up rope she'd started calling his badge. She had taken it upon herself to give Tyson a daily promotion with crayon drawings and imaginary medals. Tyson, for his part, accepted the responsibility without fuss. The courtroom settled as Judge Lott entered. A stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She'd seen the worst of humanity in her decades on the bench, and nothing about Ronnie's case surprised her. But the dog? That was new. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Everyone stood. Then the opening arguments began. The prosecutor, a calm, sharp man named DeWitt, laid out the facts like surgical cuts. Tara Ellis died of a preventable condition, liver failure, after being isolated, abused, and starved of medical care. Ronnie Dupree had faked her death on paper, then claimed the kids as his own, creating falsified documents in the process. He attempted to discard Danny by locking him in a walk-in freezer, then fled with Maddie, likely en route to traffic her across state lines. The case might have gone unsolved if not for a retired police dog who refused to walk away. DeWitt paused. And that dog, Tyson, did what trained officers couldn't. He followed a hunch that saved a life. He turned to the jury. And when we ask ourselves how evil hides, it's in the cracks, folks, between custody loopholes and paper trails. But this time, a dog sniffed it out. Ronnie's defense argued that there was no concrete proof Ronnie meant to kill Danny, that the boy had simply wandered into the freezer during a game of hide-and-seek, and Ronnie didn't realize he was gone until too late. That line of defense fell apart when the letter from Tara Ellis was introduced into evidence. The courtroom fell quiet as the judge read it aloud. He said he'd returned them to the ground. That's what he called it. Fixing God's mistake. Ronnie didn't blink, but the jury did. So did the bailiff. So did Mark. Later that day, Mark Daniels was called to the stand. The bailiff raised a hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." He sat down. The prosecutor approached. "Officer Daniels, how long have you been working with Tyson?" 8 years, Mark said. "He retired from official duty last spring. And yet he was with you that night?" Mark nodded. "He's not just my partner. He's family." "Tell us what happened." Mark recounted the scene, the snowstorm, the freezer, the pawing, the barking, the silence, the tiny thump from inside. "Without Tyson," Mark said softly, "I wouldn't have even known to check." DeWitt leaned in. "And what did the boy say when you pulled him out?" Mark paused. He said one word, "Tyson." The courtroom held its breath. Even Ronnie looked up. The jury members scribbled notes furiously. That afternoon, Tyson was called to the front, not as a witness, but to demonstrate his response behavior. A local canine handler was sworn in and explained Tyson's training history, how dogs like him are trained to indicate, alert, and track not just smells but distress in people. "Some dogs just know," she said, stroking Tyson's head, "especially ones like him. War dogs. They don't miss the signs most humans ignore." The courtroom was allowed to watch a brief video. Tyson circling the freezer, scratching, whining, barking. The timestamp matching perfectly with the moment Danny was saved. By the time the jury recessed, there wasn't much left to say, only the verdict, and it came 2 days later. Mark returned to the courtroom with Danny and Maddie in tow. Tyson sat beside them on the polished floor. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Ronnie Dupree, guilty on all counts. Guilty of attempted murder, guilty of child endangerment, guilty of kidnapping, guilty of falsifying legal documents, guilty of obstruction." The judge didn't even hesitate. "Mr. Dupree, you are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Ronnie was led away. He never looked back. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. But Mark shielded the kids from the chaos and led them down the front steps, Tyson walking calmly between them like a living wall. "Is it over?" Danny asked, his voice small. Mark crouched beside him. "He's gone. For good." Maddie reached up and placed the rope toy badge on Tyson's collar. "Then that means it's really your promotion day, right?" Mark smiled. Tyson gave a happy, quiet bark. Weeks passed. A ceremony was held at the county sheriff's office. The state governor issued a formal commendation to Tyson, declaring July 8th as Tyson Day across the county. Mark stood at the podium, his hand on Tyson's back. "I've worked alongside many good men and women," he said, voice steady. "But Tyson, he's in a class of his own. He doesn't need medals. He doesn't need headlines. He just needs people to be safe. And that's what he's always done." Applause thundered. Danny and Maddie were in the front row, and for the first time in months, they were smiling, without fear behind their eyes. Back home, in the small farmhouse Mark had grown up in, life began to find a new rhythm. Mornings started with cereal and cartoons. Afternoons were for walks with Tyson and backyard soccer. Nights were filled with bedtime stories, starry skies, and the quiet peace of knowing no one was coming to take anything away. Tyson now slept by the fireplace, his body a little slower, his ears a little grayer, but his heart unchanged, still alert, still loyal, still the hero of this home. The old farmhouse smelled like cinnamon toast and wet dog that morning, the way it often did when the kids woke up before sunrise and Tyson came in from his walk through the fields. It was quiet, the kind of peace that only comes after a long storm. Mark Daniels stood in the kitchen, watching the coffee brew, arms folded as the sun began to peek over the horizon. On the worn wooden floor behind him, Tyson lay curled up on his side, his breaths shallow but steady. He was older now, slower, grayer around the muzzle, and this morning he hadn't gotten up, not when the cereal hit the bowls. Not even when Maddie dropped an entire piece of bacon right beside his paw. On purpose. Danny had noticed first. "Dad?" he said softly, because by now he called Mark that without thinking. "Tyson's not getting up." Mark set his mug down, knelt, placed a hand gently on Tyson's chest. Still warm, still breathing, but barely. His tail wagged once when he heard Mark's voice, but he didn't move. They made a bed for him by the fireplace, right where he liked it most. Danny tucked a folded blanket under his head, and Maddie placed his rope toy, the badge, by his paw. The vet came later that morning. She was gentle, kind, knew better than to speak too soon. "He's not in pain," she said, "but he's tired, Mark. Very tired." Mark sat on the floor, hand on Tyson's neck. "Is it time?" The vet gave a sad nod. "I think he's just waiting for permission." That evening, the family gathered on the porch as the sun dipped low over the pasture. It was July 8th, Tyson Day, the anniversary of the day he saved Danny from the freezer. Tyson was wrapped in a soft blanket, resting in a wagon so the kids could pull him one last time around the yard. Maddie decorated the wagon with ribbons and a big sign that said, "Thank you, Officer Tyson." Mark walked beside them, silent. Every step felt like saying goodbye in slow motion. Later, they lay next to him by the fire. Maddie with her head on his side, Danny holding his paw, Mark with his hand over Tyson's heart. Mark whispered, "You don't have to keep watching now, buddy. We're safe. You did your job. You did more than anyone could have asked for." Tyson let out a slow exhale, and that was it. He was gone, peacefully, surrounded by the lives he saved. They buried Tyson under the big oak tree at the edge of the property, the one that Mark's father used to sit under every summer evening with a glass of lemonade and a book he never finished. Mark made the headstone himself. Tyson, canine partner, family, hero. He watched when no one else did. The kids painted stones to place around it, each one with a memory. A paw print, a drawing of a badge, a sunset. Days passed. Then weeks. The house felt different, quieter, but not empty. One night, Danny came into the living room holding a notebook. "I wrote something," he said shyly. "For Tyson." Mark nodded. "Want to read it?" Danny sat cross-legged on the couch. Maddie leaned against him. He cleared his throat. "Dear Tyson, I don't remember the moment you saved me. I was too cold, too scared. But I remember waking up and seeing you there. You didn't bark. You didn't leave. You just stayed. You saved Maddie, too. Not just from Ronnie, but from being alone. And you gave Dad someone to believe in. You were our hero, and you always will be." Danny, Mark's eyes welled up. He didn't speak, just pulled both kids into a hug and whispered, "He would have been proud." A few months later, something happened that none of them expected. It started with a knock at the door. A young reporter from a national news outlet stood outside, holding a camera and a notepad. "We're doing a feature on animal heroes," she said, "and we heard about Tyson. We'd love to tell his story." Mark hesitated, but the kids looked up at him with that same spark Tyson used to show every time he knew he was about to do something important. So Mark nodded, and the story went national. Tyson's tale touched hearts across the country. TV spots, online tributes, school classrooms naming reading corners after him. One police department in Ohio even named a new K9 Tyson 2. And in their little town, something even bigger happened. The county voted to rename the animal shelter the Tyson Daniels Center for Rescue and Rehabilitation, because heroes don't have to speak, they just have to show up. A year later, on the second annual Tyson Day, Maddie and Danny stood at the dedication ceremony beside Mark, holding scissors in front of the new bronze plaque. Mark gave a short speech, voice steady and warm. Tyson didn't just save two kids. He reminded all of us that courage isn't loud, and heroes don't always wear badges made of metal. Sometimes they have fur, and they leave paw prints, not just on the floor, but on our lefevre. The crowd stood in applause. The plaque shimmered in the sunlight, and for a brief moment, it felt like Tyson was right there among them. That night, back home, Mark looked out the window toward the oak tree. The breeze moved gently through the grass, and somewhere in the dark, he swore he heard that familiar tail thump once more. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Tyson's story may have ended, but his legacy lives on. In Danny, in Maddie, and in every child or animal who's ever needed someone to stand watch when no one else would. From all of us here at Heroes for Animals, we're grateful for your time, your tears, and your heart. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever known an animal that changed your life or someone else's? What did they teach you? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to share this story with someone who believes in second chances.